But we do want to turn now to the latest fallout from the war against Iran and the intensifying disruption to global energy markets as President Trump tries to downplay the economic impact of rising oil prices and as Iran's new supreme leader issues what the state media is calling his first public statement since his country's senior leadership was decimated by U.S. and Israeli strikes. We should note we did not hear or see the new supreme leader himself, who was wounded during the start of the war. Rather, an anchor on state TV read his defiant statement in which he vowed to keep blocking transit through the Strait of Hormuz, a vital artery for roughly 20% of the world's oil. It comes as Iran intensifies its strikes on oil related to targets throughout the region. This week alone, Iran has hit a fuel tank at a port in Oman, 2 fuel tankers off the coast of Iraq, and an energy refinery in Bahrain. Today, crude oil prices settled around $96 a barrel, up 42% since the start of the war. A separate benchmark for oil prices in Europe settled above $100 today for the first time since August of 2022. President Trump now arguing rising prices are not a bad thing, saying in a post on social media that when oil prices go up, quote, we make a lot of money from domestic oil production, and going on to say that it's more important to stop Iran from having nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, there are still major questions about the U.S. Navy's ability to escort oil tankers through the strait, as the administration has promised. Here's what the Trump administration is saying about all of that today.
It'll happen relatively soon, but it can't happen now. We're simply not ready. All of our military assets right now are focused on destroying Iran's offensive capabilities and the manufacturing industry that supplies their offensive capabilities.
Do you think by the end of this month, the U.S. Navy will be escorting some of those ships through the strait?
I think that, yes, I think that is quite likely the case. But again, I mean, I'll be over at the Pentagon later today, but that is what the military is working on.
It is my belief that as soon as it is militarily possible, the U.S. Navy, perhaps with an international coalition, will be escorting vessels through.
Now, it's hard to overstate the significance of this war when it comes to the U.S. and global economy. In its monthly report, the International Energy Agency warning it's creating, quote, the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market, and adding that the current flow through the Strait of Hormuz is somewhere between a trickle and a near standstill. This video from the group Marine Traffic, which monitors the movement of vessels around the world, showing the reduced traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. We should note that some of the noise could be the result of satellite disruptions or signal jammers. All of this coming as President Trump continues to offer more mixed messaging about his strategy, claiming the U.S. has already won the war, but also that the U.S. needs to finish the job.
You know, you never like to say too early you won. We won. We won the bet. In the first hour, it was over. But we won. But I'm pleased to report that earlier today, the International Energy Agency agreed to coordinate the release of a record 400 million barrels of oil from various national petroleum reserves around the world, which will substantially reduce the oil prices as we end this threat to America and this threat to the world. We don't want to leave early, do we, huh? We got to finish the job, right?
Joining me now is NBC News Chief Foreign Correspondent Richard Engel, NBC News Senior Business Correspondent Christine Romans, NBC News White House Correspondent Monica Alba, and NBC News International Correspondent Raf Sanchez, who is in Beirut. Thank you all for being here. Richard, let me start with you. So we got this extraordinary audio of the anchor with the state media reading what was purportedly a statement by the new supreme leader. But Richard, you can't see the supreme leader. We didn't hear his voice. What are the key takeaways and how are people in the region responding?
So, first of all, Iranian state media broadcast this message, this statement from the supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, his first statement since he was appointed as supreme leader, replacing his father, the late Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And as you say, he was not on camera. There was no picture of him. There was no audio of his voice. And that only is fueling speculation here and around the world that he may have been injured in the same attack that killed his father, that he may have been seriously injured. We're hearing many different reports, none of them confirmed about the severity of his injuries, from an amputated leg to that he might be in a coma. But the fact that he didn't appear on camera, couldn't be heard on camera, is only fueling those rumors that are circulating like wildfire around this region. But the message that he conveyed is one that has been reinforced by other members of the Iranian military, the Revolutionary Guard, particularly about the Strait of Hormuz. So whether this message came directly from him, whether he is incapacitated, we don't know. But the message was clear, and the message was that this tanker war that Iran is engaged in right now will continue.
Well, and Richard, we're seeing those images of massive tanker fires in the Strait and all across the region, quite frankly. The new Supreme Leader has said the Strait should remain closed and is vowing to continue attacks. What is the state of play right now, Richard?
Well, it's not just Iran anymore. Iran's ability to fire missiles, as CENTCOM reports every day, is greatly diminished. And its ability to launch drone attacks against the Gulf, it is still doing it, but not at the same level that it did in the first few days of the war. But I am right now in the northern Israeli city of Haifa, and Hezbollah, which is a militia based in Lebanon, backed by Iran, a supporter of Iran, has now joined in this war in a full way. And you can talk to Raf Sanchez about the impact that is having on Beirut. But it is now, for Israel, a two-front war, one against Iran and the other up here in the north, a cross-border war into Lebanon. And Israel's defense minister made a direct threat, saying that if the Lebanese government, and the Lebanese government does not support Hezbollah, in fact, the Lebanese government has called on Hezbollah to be disarmed, but the Israeli defense minister said that if the government can't stop Hezbollah from carrying out attacks at northern Israel, then Israeli troops will take more territory inside Lebanon. There are already troops on the ground. More Israeli troops have been deployed to northern Israel for a potential deepening cross-border incursion. Israel already occupies a significant amount of land inside Lebanon and now is threatening to take even more unless the Lebanese government can stop this militia group.
Well, Richard, let me ask you about something that Britain's defense minister is saying, that Iran is likely laying mines in the Strait. What are the implications of that, if true?
It would have a huge implication because mines and sea drones are these kind of weapons that are very difficult to find. They can stay underwater or semi-submerged for a long time. They can be hit accidentally. It is not like stopping an incoming ballistic missile, which you can see, and you can see its trajectory. You can predict its launch. They can linger and serve as a very long-term problem for the Strait of Hormuz, and removing them, like removing mines from the territory, can take a very from the ground can take a very long time. So it means shipping costs go up, insurance costs go up, means that a ship could hit one accidentally. They move obviously with the current. They could move out of the Strait of Hormuz. It is a very dangerous development, if true, for this critical waterway and beyond.
Well, Richard Engel, thank you so much for joining us with all of those breaking developments. We really appreciate it. Please continue to stay safe. And let me go to Raf Sanchez, who you were just talking about. Richard, Raf, you just heard Richard make the point that Israel has been launching waves of attacks into Lebanon. What exactly are you seeing on the ground there?
Well, Kristen, we've been seeing and hearing those waves of attacks here in Beirut. Israel, in just the last couple of hours, has been pounding the southern suburbs of the city, an area that it considers to be a Hezbollah stronghold. But then, maybe 3 hours ago, they struck where you're seeing now in the center of your screen, the very heart of the Lebanese capital. That is in the middle of the city. It's a densely populated part of town. They say that they were targeting Hezbollah there. But there really is a feeling here in Beirut that nowhere is safe at this point. And there is intense Israeli fire going on further south near the Israeli border. And we should say Hezbollah is shooting back. There was this coordinated strike last night with Iran, Hezbollah firing some 200 rockets, 20 drones, according to the Israeli military. So it certainly does feel here in Lebanon that the situation is escalating. Kristen.
Well, let me ask you about Hezbollah, because there was a sense that Hezbollah had been significantly weakened after its latest conflict with Israel. What is the actual state of Hezbollah?
It's a really, really good question. Hezbollah, before October 7th, 2023, when the fighting started in Gaza and then spread all across the region, was really the crown jewel of the Iranian proxy groups. It was probably the best armed, non-governmental army anywhere in the world, some 150,000 missiles and rockets. But then when it came to the fighting with Israel, it underperformed relative to expectations. The Israelis really carried out a number of successful operations, including, you'll remember, that infamous pager operation where Hezbollah operatives had their pagers exploding in their hands. But the group is clearly down but not out, and they are fighting back. They are, it seems, still able to coordinate with Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps. 2 Israeli soldiers have been killed in southern Lebanon so far. Those are the only Israeli military casualties of this war so far. The Iranians, as far as we know, have not inflicted any military casualties. So Hezbollah is weakened, but it is certainly able to still fight for now, at least. Kristen.
All right, Raf Sanchez reporting from Lebanon. Please be safe, Raf. We appreciate your being there for us. Let me turn to Christine Romans now. Christine, let me get your take on the latest. The International Energy Agency agreeing to release 400 million barrels of oil from reserves, of course, to help ease those prices that have continued to go up. What do you make of this? How significant is this move? Could it have an immediate impact?
Well, the announcement is just huge. 400 million barrels. We've never seen anything like that. And it's double what the same group committed to after Russia invaded Ukraine a few years ago. So it shows you just how big the problem and the concern is about global supply. It'll take time for this oil to make it to the market. Experts tell me we're talking about, this is maybe, I don't know, if you're talking about 20 million barrels a day in the Strait of Hormuz that's offline. This is 400 million. The world consumes 100 million a day. That's 4 days of global supply. This huge and historic release will accommodate. So that's one reason why you're seeing oil prices continue to rise. Until the Strait, the pictures you're seeing there, until that is not a concern anymore, ships on fire, until the Strait is putting through 80 or so tankers a day, you still have these global oil supply concerns. And so that is the underlying problem here. All the other attempts to mitigate oil prices are just that, attempts around the edges to mitigate what are rising oil prices.
Well, Christine, you get to, I think, what's a really important point about how quickly will people actually feel the impact here? How quickly could U.S. gas prices actually start to drop because of these actions?
I've been on the phone for 2 or 3 days about when gas prices are going to go down, and not one single expert has said gas prices will go down. What they're telling me is moves like this will slow the advance of gas prices. One expert telling me the wholesale increase in gasoline prices hasn't all of it appeared on the retail level yet. So even if oil prices stopped rising from here, you still have a delayed reaction that has to be baked in here. And we don't see an end in sight overall here for the conflict in the region, and unstopping this chain of events is going to take time, even assuming it were to happen overnight. So what I hear from experts is this is the biggest supply disruption in history. There is nothing like it since the 1970s. They tell me we will not see gas lines and shortages in the U.S. because the U.S. is now a huge energy supplier in its own right, but you will see higher prices. That's how it'll percolate through here.
All right, Christine Romans watching all of the markets, the money, gas prices, everything for us. Thank you, Christine. Really appreciate it. Let me turn to Monica Alba over at the White House now. Monica, let me ask you, because we're learning that the president is considering waiving what's called the Jones Act. You have new reporting about this. Talk about what specifically the Jones Act is and how this would work.
So, Kristen, this is basically a century-old statute that requires that goods that are going between U.S. ports, that they be transported specifically on U.S. crewed, U.S. flagged, and U.S. built specific ships. So the thinking here is that if you waive the Jones Act, if you loosen some of those restrictions, then you can actually have foreign tankers or foreign ships to come in and help make things flow a little bit more easily to perhaps, again, deal with exactly what you were just talking to Christine about. But there are two issues here. One is that the administration says this is something that the president is still weighing. He hasn't decided whether he's definitely going to do it or how long the waiver would actually be in effect. And second is, again, what you guys were just discussing. It's unclear whether that would actually help prices go down. And we don't know how fast or how much that would help in the short term, which is where the administration knows they have a limited window to try to address some of these top concerns.
You know, Monica, it's interesting what the president has been saying about this issue. On social media, he posted, quote, "When oil prices go up, we make a lot of money." But that's not exactly what he was saying on the campaign trail, right? Talk about some of the mixed messaging that we're hearing.
Yeah, and this really does add to several examples of mixed messaging in an administration and a White House that seems to want to present this and sort of have it both ways when they're talking about this, and the awareness that prices, gas prices going up, the pain at the pump is something that is going to be a pain that is felt in the immediate. You have all of these top cabinet officials recognizing that, but the president also then trying to sort of spin why it also might be good for the United States at the same time, while the president is also saying that this is a short-term excursion, in his words, but that there's still some things left to be done militarily. So there is a lot of confusion that is coming out specifically from the president and from the Trump administration about what they are doing economically to combat and try to tame oil prices, while also trying to discuss the military objectives and what this might actually mean for when this wraps up. The president just talked about this a short time ago at an event for Women's History Month, where he is saying that things are moving along very rapidly. That is how he is trying to put this into context. But remember that initially the White House had said this would be a 4 to 6 week military conflict. The president trying to project this week it could be wrapping before that, while still trying to figure out exactly how the president is going to determine that the U.S. military objectives are done. We haven't gotten his exact assessment for how he's going to be able to determine that and declare victory potentially. Kristen.
All right, Monica Alba at the White House for us. Monica, thank you so much. Joining me now is retired Colonel Steve Warren, former Chief of Strategic Communications for the Army and now an NBC News military analyst. Colonel Warren, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thanks. It's great to be here with you.
Well, it's great to have you here. I want you to pick up where Monica just left off, which is that it's not clear when exactly President Trump can extract the United States from this war. He has said he can do it at any time. What is the military reality check on that? Once you are entangled in a military engagement like this, how complicated is it to actually extract troops?
There's two components to this particular military entanglement that we're in. Component one is the accomplishment of all of the military objectives that the president, the secretary, the chairman have laid out. And we're familiar with those: destroy the missiles, destroy the Navy, take care of the nuclear weapons, etc. So we're familiar with those. When those missions are accomplished, we'll know it. We can measure those things. And then the chairman of the Joint Chiefs can go and tell his boss, hey, Mr. President, we've accomplished your missions. What do you want to do now? The second component of that is the tough one, though, because now the Iranians have said, well, we're going to keep striking the ships in the straits. And so now that's a problem. Now we have to make them stop doing that. And that's going to be trouble.
Well, and to that point, 3 more oil tankers were struck overnight in the Strait of Hormuz. Talk about the implications of that and strategically what Iran thinks it's accomplishing with those strikes.
Iran's strategy, I think very clearly, this is a test of wills. It's how much physical punishment can the Iranians withstand versus how much economic pain can the can the West withstand? So it's who can hold out the longest. And right now, the Iranians are trying to squeeze the West. And this is classic asymmetric warfare. We're hitting them with bullets. They're hitting us in our pocketbook, right? That's an asymmetry, two different things. But both sides are being affected. So it remains to be seen who can last the longest. I don't predict we'll be able to wipe out the Iranian drones. There's too many of them. It's like, if people may remember back during the Iraq wars, the biggest threat was these IEDs. Yes. It's kind of the same thing. Small, cheap, effective, and terrorizing.
Well, Britain's defense minister is saying he believes that Iran has started placing mines in the strait, and demining apparently very difficult. Talk a little bit about that and why it's so complicated.
Mines are tough. Again, they're cheap. They're very difficult to see under general rules, and they terrify mariners for good reason. One single mine can sink a ship. It can sink it with one mine. They're magnetic. Some of them are anchored at various levels, so they can be a defense against submarines as well. So they're anchored at various levels. Some of them floating on the surface. They're magnetic, so they'll drift towards where a big metal ship is, and one impact, and you've got a massive fireball.
Could they actually pose a threat to the long-term goals of this conflict, this war?
Absolutely. I mean, they absolutely will. If the goals are now to, allow commerce to continue, one of the stated goals was to prevent Iran from projecting power outside of its borders. Well, the Strait are outside of Iran's borders. That's going to be a problem. And mines are so difficult to clean up. We have to use wooden ships to get them because they're magnetic. These are a real problem.
Well, Israel, let's talk about what Israel is doing, essentially expanding its attacks. You heard my colleague Raf Sanchez talking about this against Hezbollah in Lebanon. What do you make of the state of play there? And the sense that Hezbollah had been weakened, but clearly Israel thinks there are still plenty of targets.
That's right. And to be clear, Hezbollah fired at Israel first after the Ayatollah was killed. And I think the Israelis have simply had enough. This is their opportunity now. I believe they view it as their chance to go finally finish off Hezbollah, or as close as they can. But what I think people should remember, this is what is most notable to me. The Israelis have been working on Hezbollah really in earnest for the last 2 years. And Hezbollah is still shooting. And we've only been working on the Iranians now for 12, 13 days. So something to keep in mind, right? It's harder to wipe out an enemy's capability to shoot back than many people think.
All right. Colonel Steve Warren, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for your perspective. We really appreciate it.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.